It's like that in a hieroglyphic, yeah. It's like that in a hieroglyphic.
They're selling your ability to prove that Diop lost at the Cairo symposium. That's nonsense.
I'm black. Black power. Black power. Black power.
I always say I was a Pan-Africanist before I knew what Pan-Africanism was.
And this is the history of series.
Legendary Senegalese man that dedicated his life to fighting racism through showing that Africa was the center of the entire world. All civilization comes from Africa, really. Where does a lot of European culture come from? Greek. Where does a lot of Greek culture come from? Egypt. Where is Egypt? Africa. So therefore, Africa is actually the center of a lot of civilization.
Don't tell me about unity, right? Because we have to make a choice today on identity.
So you telling me Egypt was founded by Asiatics? Why they don't say none of that? They clearly tell you every time it's beef, a king coming from the south is gonna be cool. Not from the Mediterranean, a king coming from the Mediterranean. Show me that in the text.
Sir Wallace Budge also said, the ancient Egyptian language can't be Semitic in origin because it contains too many words that express fundamental relationships, feelings, and beliefs that are peculiarly African and foreign to Semitic peoples.
This is Simroset. So let's go back. It say Amenemhat, but that's that little punk crew that after Nubia smashed everything and then they got it in the 12th dynasty, after the Nubian 11th dynasty, they started spreading negative sentiment towards Kush. This is how we form our conclusions. The primary is on the damn screen right here. You can't get around it. That's where it's at. Why ain't nothing popping back up about no Nubians though? I didn't Google the word Asiatic. I'm looking up the word weak, wretched, foul. We found the one, we went all through it. I bet you cats thought they had something to hula hoop over because they didn't do this work. So I don't know what's coming down the pipeline.
Ici, cette reproduction est importante.
This is a very important reproduction.
C'est dans le tombeau de Ramsès III.
This is found in the tomb of Ramses III.
20e dynastie.
The 20th dynasty.
Vous avez le personnage de gauche.
The person on the left.
C'est le type général, donc, représenté par l'artiste égyptien lui-même.
This is the general type represented by the Egyptian artist himself.
And South Sudan is the only majority Nilotic country in the world.
He would argue that we don't call it an Afro-Asiatic culture, but we actually call it a Nilotic culture.
The Nilotic peoples are peoples indigenous to the Nile Valley.
Egyptian scholar Gamal Mokhtar stated, the inventory of hieroglyphic symbols is entirely based on melodic fauna and flora, thus proving that the script is of purely African origin.
My point was very clear, that when he asked me, who did Diop say connected the people to, right? I showed you from the Cairo symposium that's the one that first, he the one that introduced 150,000 years into the equation, not the white people.
Hegel was like, Hegel stated that Africa was no part of the world history. It had no movement, and therefore we leave it never to discuss it again. So early on, there was this intellectual mindset that Africa had no history.
The guy who really started this whole debate is named Cheikh Anta Diop.
L'Éthiopie et la Tanzanie.
We are able to say scientifically today, to say with certainty that mankind was born in Africa.
What'd this say, Juju? What'd this say?
It said located upstream of the first cataract of the Nile, today Northern Sudan and Upper Egypt. people lived in ancient Nubia from at least 300,000 BC.
So this is very important, Sudan and Upper Egypt.
On the latitude, more or less, of Kenya, and that area which comprises Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania.
With the inclusion of modern and ancient genomes combined with their method, the researchers were able to make a prediction on where our common ancestors lived. The inferred geographic region from their oldest samples suggested that they originated in Sudan.
The originals built the earth. One must there be aggression to learn a basic lesson. Quite majestic, stern within reality. A juggernaut when you tamper with mentality. Or with a crown, extension and dimension of a brain cell, bringing hell to the sellouts.
And South Sudan is the only majority Nilotic country in the world. Ancestral tribal territories are actually found in South Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, DRC, Burundi, Sudan, and Tanzania.
Et qui va même jusqu'en Afrique du Sud, suivant un axe nord-sud.
And going on a north-south axis all the way south to South Africa.
Why should the people in the South be involved? Why should they associate themselves with Kemet?
The difference is that they have kept more of their culture, but most of it is all the same. We're all one.
What celebrities have E1B1A? Nelson Mandela. Also, Ramses III.
Extraordinary pro-black, so God creations who control thousands. Catch me at the flicks, Apollo, Rap, Frederick Douglass. You know what? Hey yo, this. Hey yo, how can I move the crowd? First of all, ain't no mistakes allowed.
Remember, Guti, African spirituality, it's nature-centered.
Detailed on Tellinger's website as being a stone that looks like Horus, so a connection to Egypt there.
The foundation or the basis of African spirituality is the African calendar.
Adam's calendar, which may be the oldest man-made structure that is still in existence, was discovered in 2003, completely by accident.
What do you guys mean when you say stone calendar? How do you know it's a calendar?
It's a calendar because it marks the equinoxes as well as the solstices. You know, how does it happen? On the spring equinox, the sun creates a shade in one of those stones.
And on the equinox, and where the stone man was right there, I don't know if you got that, the stone man was in that hole over there and aligned with the equinox. So as the sun sets over there, at this pointy stone casts a shadow right in the middle here. So this pointy stone starts to grow up and it goes higher and higher until eventually the sun sets and you got the shadow of that pointy stone there. On the sunrise, when this Horus stone was up, the profile of the Horus stone would have hit this first rock.
Right? So that then becomes a marker for the spring equinox. Then, for the summer solstice, one of, those stones are also a marker. When it is summer solstice, the sun will hit on the eastern marker, in that direction.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Also, like how those clocks, those the ones that use the shade.
Yes.
So it's a structure like that.
Yes, it's a structure like that.
Oh. Egyptian, African, now I'm on a black watch. Check my sundial, synchronize the clock. I can catch a shadow as the moon reflects the sun.
The shadow hits the rock there. So the shadow moves across. So you can tell every day of the year by the shadow on that rock where you are. Now, this is interesting because you can see this rock was carved out. So it's as if they planted it in place based on the summer solstice, because that's accurate, that's natural, and then they carved this out to fit the winter solstice. Because otherwise, why would this be carved out? This is clearly, cleared out here.
Yeah, this will cast a shadow, so it's really about what the shadow looks like.
Once you understand the African calendar, you also understand the African creation story. You are then able to then connect back to in nature.
Yeah, if you look at the sunrise, the sun will always look right. It rises
above this. And the long shadow of this rock is placed on that rock in front. Now, if we are in Egypt, and you ask, please do ask this question next time you go, or if you
When I go to Egypt, yeah.
Yeah, ask them what marks the rise of the sun in the pyramids. They will tell you exactly. Horus marks the rise of the sun in the pyramids.
It's good to know that in ancient times, Egyptians developed all sciences of the mind to the point where they ruled the planet. But Rome, Greece, and Persia wasn't having it. They attacked and won the war, but it wasn't enough. They had to get to the core.
Not the Sphinx.
In order to destroy the Egyptian race, they had to wipe the sciences from off the face of the planet. So they proceeded to ban it and replace it with Christianity. And it's been that way all the way to today. Learn what we teach, hear what we say.
Horus marks the rise of the sun in the pyramids. And Horus is overlooking Orion, just like it's happening here. And who is Horus? Horus is the sun god, or Ra. That's the sunrise marker here.
The chemical structure of our universe, it's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Meaning that carbon, this is the fuel which is burned by the sun, because the sun burns carbon to create the hydrogen, right? Then there's oxygen, which is carried from the moon. So without this chemical structure, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, there's no life on Earth.
See these three megaliths right here? Right here? Well, these three megaliths right here represent, on the ground, Orion's belt, what the Europeans call, and Sahu is what the ancient Kemites call. Now,
we have also, in the past, asserted that the Sphinx was originally a lion, which interestingly correlates to the following hypothesis with fascinating accuracy: the Orion theory. The coincidence with pyramids aligned with Orion's belt and other significant constellational positions. Bauval and Hancock support the theory, believing the Great Sphinx was begun in 10,500 BC, creating reference to the constellation of Leo and the orientation of the entire complex with the Nile River and even Milky Way, claimed by them as connected respectively.
Watch what happened. And you said Diop got beat up. Now it says, Professor Diop referred to Dr. Masulard's book for the critical examination of the information provided by the physical anthropology concerning the people in Egypt in ancient times. In passing, Professor Diop pointed out that the craniometric criteria were quite inadequate for assigning individuals to racial categories. Neither the choice of indicators nor the terminology used was uniform or satisfactory. According to Professor Masulards, the population of ancient Egypt perhaps comprised at least 3 different racial elements. Negroid. So hold on. For the record, y'all clearly see that nobody, just like Unc said, and like we always say, nobody exclude that Negro element from being there. Y'all tried to make it some melting pot that turned everybody tan. It's not working. Negroid amount and over 1/3 of the total Mediterranean people and people of Cro-Magnon type. Professor Diop inferred from this that the populations of Egypt was basically Negro during the pre-dynastic period, a conclusion contradicting the theory that the Negro element spread in Egypt in later times. Now look, he's going to show you how Diop was breaking it down. Skeletons with fragments of skin attached. Repeat. Skeletons with fragments of skin attached, dating from the very ancient times before the practice of mummification was introduced. Before mummification was introduced, had been discovered by Elliot Smith. These fragments containing melanin in sufficient quantities to establish them as negroid skin. Okay? So this is what opted Diop to want to go get some more samples. Because this man, Elliot Smith, had just found some samples attached to some skeletons that the Hawass couldn't keep from Diop. Or not even Hawass, he wasn't in the thing yet. But the Antiquities Commission couldn't keep from Diop. Maybe Hawass was in the thing. He was doing that for hella long. But let's see. In the quest for positive proof, Professor Diop had studied a number of participants being subjected to labor examinations in Dakar. A number of preparations being subjected to laboratory. Golly, I'm ready to stop reading. Because I said a number of, anyway, being subject to laboratory examinations in Dakar. These consisted of samples of skin taken from mummies found in marionette excavations. These all revealed, and Professor Diop invited the specialists present to examine the samples. We got video of that. Now, so he at the debate with some damn samples. Came off some bones. He had some other ones though. He showed up to the debate with shit they ain't got. Excuse my language. All right? He did though. And invited them to take a look. Now this is where the pseudo-menudos come in. Because this was stated at the symposium. They all revealed. And Professor Diop invited the specialist present to examine the samples. The presence of a considerable quantity of melanin between the epidermis and the dermis. So he already did the test and said, look, take a look. Melanin, which was not present in white skin, persisted for millions of years, notwithstanding prefix affirmations to the contrary, as could be seen from examining nations of skins of fossil animals. Professor Diop hoped to be given the opportunity of carrying out similar research on skins of the pharaohs whose mummies were in the Cairo Museum collection. All right. So he already stepped up beating the brakes off people because the first three people reading their books, two of them tried to agree with Diop. One of them said, yo, let's just not use racial classifications. He stepped up with bones, and he didn't have bones, but he had specimens for them to, their specialists, to look over.
Before we came to this country, we were kings and queens, never porch monkeys.
In the Schuderman study from 2017 on ancient Egyptian mummy genomes suggests an increase of sub-Saharan African ancestry in post-Roman periods. It is stated, in contrast, a substantially larger sub-Saharan African component found primarily in West African Yoruba is seen in modern Egyptians compared to the ancient samples. From analyzing modern Egyptian DNA, such as recent admixture from populations with sub-Saharan and non-African ancestries, attributed to trans-Saharan slave trade and the Islamic expansion.
He went on to state that a conclusive anthropological study would also include osteological measurements and the study of blood groups. So he crushed them because they laid out 4 parameters that didn't include 2 more that Diop included. He said, hold up, you also got to look at their bone measurements and their blood types. Ain't that Osteological, yeah.
This is the test that proves Cheikh Anta Diop was correct about melanin levels in Egyptian mummies. Determination of optimal rehydration, fixation and staining methods for histological and immunohistochemical analysis of mummified soft tissues, A.M. Makota and M. Vermeeren.
It says, it was remarkable. What? Hold on. You clowns. Look at this. This is the dude who I told you who was neutral. Remember when I said, imagine a courtroom where you got a plaintiff and the defendant and the judge and the jury, and the most neutral even more than the bailiff, because the bailiff might have to hop up, put hands on you if you do something. The most neutral is that clerk back there typing everything that go on. So if you start an outburst in the clerk, the clerk has to still type. It's an outburst and detail everything that happens. So this dude who had to do that said it was remarkable. For example, that present-day exemptions, particularly in Upper Egypt, belong to the same blood group B as the populations of West Africa. See, y'all don't want to look at this shit. Y'all just don't want to.
V38 formed 41,400 years ago, most likely in the Horn of Africa. The migration routes of haplogroup E1b1a and the tribes observed with a high frequency of V38 are mapped.
Or whatever. I mean, Ramses III is bearing E1b1a Y chromosome lineage, which is an old African lineage in the E. That doesn't mean wherever that lineage originated in Africa, doesn't mean that his daddy came from there or his granddaddy came from there. That stuff was all mixed up in the Sahara and the Nile Valley.
Count Voney is a European. This is what he writing. He said, hey, a nation of blacks had to be the people that taught us, right? This is the guy that said to this people, that taught us how to read and write. And so when you're in school and you're not being taught this, you're being taught blacks are Negroes, blacks history started with slavery. You have no history. Or only West Africa, slave trade. You see that they know we are very ancient. It's in our DNA, is wisdom. It means he is. We just got to attach.
And modern scholars, he said, refuse to take into account those texts. By contrast, the 18th century author Volney did speak of the inhabitants of the ancient Egypt as Negroes. Furthermore, now this is in the 18th century. Furthermore, the biblical tradition considered Egypt to belong to the descendants of Ham. Professor Diop considered that the science of Egyptology, a product of imperialism, had much to answer for the denying all the facts to which he had just referred.
That double movement to dissociate both Egypt and Nubia with the Hamitic hypothesis.
Beginning in the late 19th century, scholars generally classified the Hamitic race as a subgroup of the Caucasian race.
So is he getting the brakes beat off him? This is a neutral party writing this down. Look, Professor Diop then turned his attention to the way which Egyptians describe themselves. Now it gets critical, because I'm still on Diop's side of this argument, but I just say that this is not all the way conclusive. Now look, this is when the debate gonna start. They use only one word for this purpose. That's not right. They use more than one word. But for this purpose, to describe themselves. So he's basically saying a category of this term represents a physical characteristic, and they use only one word for this purpose, Kemet, KMT, okay? The strongest term existing in the language of the pharaohs to indicate blackness. Anyone disagree with that? If you want to disagree with that, I'll cite two things right here for Diop. Let's go, right on the goddamn screen. I'm going to cite black cattle and black one and black leather and black land, all called Kemet, not Kim. None of them is called Kim. Okay? And the blackness in the pupil of your eye. It's not called Kim. It's called Kemet. All right? So let's go back and see if Diop was wrong. The strongest term existence in the language of the pharaohs to indicate blackness, 100% correct, which was translated by Professor Diop as the Negroes. Now, Wujahu and them got funny with this part, and it was true what they were saying. He was using their own, since they said Nehesi meant Negroes, he just used their own methodology back on them, but he's using it more appropriately. But this Negro thing is antiquated in our time period. But in 1974, it probably wasn't all the way antiquated. It ain't all the way outdated. Consequently, the hieroglyph was not written with the crocodile scales, but with a piece of charcoal was his stance. Professor Diop went, Professor Diop went into the question of compound words based on the root Kim. This one, we're going to put this on the screen because I've been reading for 30 billion hours. Shout out to y'all who always contribute to the show and make sure it's cool. And, you know, it's cool. I'm going to keep reading. The Egyptians distinguished themselves from other people by calling themselves Kemetiyu. Okay? But they did not draw a distinction on the basis of color between themselves and Nubians. So one might argue that the Book of Gates was them drawing a distinction between themselves on the basis of colors. Right here, he's talking grammatically and linguistically. Lastly, black was an adjective applied to the principal Egyptian deities: Osiris, Apis, Men, Thoth, Isis, and Set. So let's keep it clear. No, Isis, I'm sorry, and Isis. Let me show y'all. There's a period after Isis. And it says Set, on the other hand, was described as red, as were all other evil beings.
Now there's another term called Egyptians. I hate to break it to you, there was never an ancient people called Egyptians. There was never an ancient people called Egyptians by the indigenous people.
The type of stuff you don't find on the internet.
The biggest trick Egyptologists pulled to confuse history was to make the enemy of Kemet the Egyptians and make the founders of the civilization other than Egyptians.
That the Egyptian, we have different races that were part of this Egyptian culture and nation. So we have one that is from the Delta, Lower Egypt. They were more short and curly, more like the Yemenite, if you want. Mm-hmm.
So what do you make of that? You look at him, you've been to Egypt, you've seen mummies. What do you make of this resemblance and proving it in DNA?
Your community with a connection to this ethnicity regions. We got Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, Ethiopia. Okay. We got Saudi Arabia. We got United Arab Emirates and Yemen.
The Ethiopians still use a script that is similar to that of ancient South Arabia. This kinship enabled the 19th century epigraphists to decipher many of the inscriptions.
Egypt 7%. Oh, for real? Oh, Masri? أنا مصري. Oh, الحلاوة. Oh, إيه زي العسل. Ew. 1% Levant? Levant. What does that mean? From Syria? Okay. Oh, the hell is that? What is this? What kind of fake ass country?
Let's go back to 10,000 BCE. Anatolian farmer DNA. Here's the modern distribution, but Anatolian farmer DNA is coming from Anatolia here, but it was also in the Levant. If you're completely lacking any anthropological evidence or genetic research, and you just go on dogma from the internet, then sure, you could claim that anybody at all times was black. All of these white people in history were black. Arab people and Persian people were black. The Neo-Assyrians were black. The Hittites were black. But they weren't. Nazarene was Galilean and spoke Aramaic. Here's a person who speaks Aramaic. Does this person look sub-Saharan African to you?
10%. So yeah, I already know I was black. Like, I'm come on, black homie. You already know that.
I don't care if I'm the first person to say this, but us Somalis are not black.
The E1B1B DNA haplogroup is primarily distributed in North Africa and the Horn of Africa.
And we have another race of the ancient Egyptian coming from the upper side of Egypt, lower from the delta. We call it the Upper Egypt. They are more like Dexter. They are more like Sudan, tall. I would say black, you know, that, and...
This is the Nilotic Meridian line.
Yeah.
And this stone circle is also on the same line of longitude as well.
She would argue that we don't call it an Afro-Asiatic culture, but we actually call it a Nilotic culture.
So who were the people that the Greeks were talking about? Who was these African people? But academia chooses to continue this mechanism of Greek interpretation. So there is no Egypt. There is no Egyptians. So how could there be Egyptology? If there's Egyptology, Egyptology is the field of understanding the Greek understanding of Africa.
And you're going to see that wretched Kush was really both wretched Mesopotamia, wretched Mediterranean. I should write the book Wretched Mediterranean, since Stuart Tyson Smith wrote Wretched Kush off just a few attestations. We already down to this one. How many they got? 107, so this will be more exhaustive. Please just have fun, kick back, and watch how they get their hands put on.
Is there a mystery hidden just under the surface of the first name of a man revealed in the book of Genesis? In the conventional Hebrew, most of us understand that Adam means red earth or man.
Kemet means black.
And then you had these African American writers, they were like, hold up, no, that doesn't sound right. That's not right. So first of all, they pointed out, as Kevin said, that the curse was on Canaan. And Alexander Crummell in his book wrote, and he pointed that out. He was like, this is the discrepancy here. It was on Canaan, the one son that had no connection to Africa. Because Mizraim was supposed to be, you know, that's Egypt, Cush, that's Nubia. The other son was supposed to be Libya. So it's like there are four sons, but that one has no relationship to Africa. That's the one that the curse is on. So he pointed out that discrepancy, like you all are misinterpreting the scripture. But then you had this other turn where these African American writers are like, okay, so not only was it not a curse on Ham, but we have these descendants here, Cush and Mizraim. They are the progenitors of the African race. So they are Black. So they started claiming that Hamitic genealogy, you know? So they turned the tables on the Egyptologists and the anthropologists that were trying to take the history away.
Now remember, I claim this is Enki's site.
We do not go for no Anunnaki. That's bullshit. That's nonsense. Forget that the bullshit that man is talking about.
Enki was the architect of the genetic engineer, whose symbol were the serpents, the caduceus, the medical symbol, right? That was retained as the creation of humanity and encoded with lots of other information.
Let's just wait till the dogs stop.
Yes, sir.
And then I'll ask you the question again.
You know, Michael Tellinger is a friend of a white man who hates black people like poison. You cannot be a scientist if you are a racist.
Egypt didn't start where fools think it did. You know, because a lot of people, they think Egypt started in the north.
Yes.
Egypt started here, not Egypt. Remember, Egypt, it's a Greek, it's a colonizer's name, you know, for the northern part, you know, of Kemet.
The Nile Delta, which is a pan-Hellenic trading outpost, when they actually finally start interacting with the Egyptians are ruled by the Nubians.
Press 1 if you understand that the word Egypt is Latin. It derives from Egyptos, which is Greek.
You can't tell nobody that Brother Reggie ain't from Castle Hill. At one point of time, Castle Hill projects or houses used to be the most dangerous project in New York City. And that was the time that I grew up. That was the time that I grew up. But for me, something special really happened. And that was the entree into black culture.
There is no ancient source that Egypt is connected to Hawa, Ka, Ptah, or Hikaptah. There's no source for that. There's no source for that, y'all. Right? Egyptos is more connected to Aegina. We'll find out who Aegina is.
According to legends, the island derived its name from Aegina, the mother of the famous hero Aeacus. Aeacus, who later became the king of Aegina, was born and raised on the island.
Right? And more connected to the Aegean, like the Aegean Sea.
The Aegean Sea, an arm of the Mediterranean Sea, is an 83,000 square mile stretch between Europe and Asia. It lies between Greece and Turkey.
That's where the prefix comes from. There's no mystery. The prefix of Egyptos comes from Aegina that becomes the Aegean. There is no mystery about the prefix. It don't mean Hawaka, right? And just because Egypt has a P in it, that makes it connected to Ptah. The term Egypt is a fake term created from ancient Greeks for the purposes of Greek understanding, right? And for the purposes of trade. The term Egypt, of course, derives from the Greek word Egyptos, and it is Latinized to Egypt. It's still a fake term, right? It was created for by the Greeks for Greek understanding.